I find that overall a very good guideline to say what's the original intention? What was it designed for? What was it meant to be?
In our last conversation, we talked about how one reads a text, how one reads a musical text, the differences between the two before one gets to the question of how to perform it. I would like, if you agree, to speak a little bit about this much used and abused word, interpretation. In music, in fact, in a purely philosophical way, there is no such a thing as an interpretation. It is the piece of music. Do I do it justice or not with whatever talent, power I have? But music, Beethoven doesn't need interpreters. He doesn't need translators. You know, neither does Boulez, no composer. And interpretation in musical circles is often used to justify capricious reaction to the music. You know, it's written pianissimo. I feel it better in fortissimo or in mezzo forte or whatever it is. You know, I like it better than this. This is no interpretation. Then the other extreme is where everything is set in advance. And my interpretation of this piece is, first of all, that it starts in a very somber mood, and then it goes like this, and I do like this, and I move it here, and I go, usually has to do about speed. People are fascinated by how quickly or how slowly a certain musician performs a certain piece of music, which I find is totally uninteresting. I never forget, after I did the ring for 5 years in Bayreuth, there was 1 year without a ring, and the next year, my colleague James Levine conducted the ring, somebody whom I admire enormously. And I was very curious, of course, how it was, because we are very good friends, etc., and I couldn't be present. And whoever I asked, he said, oh, he did that slower than you, and that faster than you. Totally uninteresting, totally unimportant. But when one talks about interpretation in music, starts with that. Toscanini is faster than Furtwängler. Etc., etc. And then the question of the fidelity to the text, of which we have already spoken to. But of course, all this is in a much more subjective world than in your world, where you have text with real words.
Yes, and no tempo is exactly requested. You know, there's no such thing as a metronome, so that there's no gauge. It's, but still, you know, that's what I meant with getting out of the way, meaning let the text, or in my case, the character, take place, its own place. It's not. I can only, with interpreting, obstruct the intention of the author by saying, no, it should be, actually, it's not Richard III who has the hunchback, it's Richard II. So, I mean, it's obstructing the original intention. I find that overall a very good guideline to say what's the original intention? What was it designed for? What was it meant to be? Not only in the arts, even, you know, on the street. I find that a very good guideline to say, am I using this? Am I thinking that against the intention or in favor of the intention? I lately observe more and more that this world that we live in is more and more defined, or almost exclusively defined by now, by quantities. Because quantities is something everybody can understand. I can see, I don't need to know anything about music or piano if I see that he does it really, really fast, he must be fantastic. So virtuosity is easier quantifiable than true insight into a text. I need to somehow tune into the same wavelength. I need to know a little bit what you said. Knowledge, as Goethe said, you only see what you know, and the same is true for hearing. I only hear what I know. If I know nothing, but he does it really like an acrobat, I can I don't need to know anything about acrobatics to know that 3 saltos, 3 somersaults are more than 2. And it must be therefore that much more difficult, and therefore that acrobat who does that must be that much better.
But I don't think you mean virtuosity. I think you mean dexterity. Because virtuosity, I mean,
not the true.
No, I don't want to be. But virtuosity also comes from the word virtue. The virtue that somebody is able to play things that are extremely difficult with great ease, and also virtuosity of color, of phrasing. Virtuosity is what you talk about is of course very, very important, but you talk about dexterity. And in music, in performing music, there is something which I don't know whether you have the equivalent in acting, that from repetition, without thought, in practicing or whatever it is, you get a certain mechanical ability to get over the obstacles. And if you get to that stage, you never get rid of the feeling of mechanic in what you play. You cannot say, I'm going to practice now for 12 hours, because that is the time I need to really be able to control this passage. If your concentration span is only 7 hours, that means that for 5 hours you have mechanically let your fingers continue doing it, and therefore become something mechanical, and I believe you never will get rid of this mechanical aspect in the performance. I don't know whether that is the same.
No, but we're lazy. We're not as industrious and diligent as musicians are. We're lazy. We do it, because we have to, and then we get rid of it.
And how does it work in a theater or in films, precisely with the silences, with the pauses? Does the stage director decide that and tells you, no, don't say that line yet, wait until it, or do you, how does that work? Well, how do you deal with the element of timing which is not in the text?
Right. I would like to see it as a musical element in it. So the length, for example, of a pause should be defined by what's before and what's after. A pause in itself is very difficult. Then you say, well, you need to be able to fill the pause. Yeah, of course, you can't just stop and quit everything and then start again. That's not a pause. A pause is carrying it over from what was before. It's like a bridge, carrying it over without sound, or without saying something.
I have noticed sometimes, maybe you can clarify that for me, I have noticed sometimes in the theater, less so in films, because in the end it's in the cutting that you really do that when there is a scene between two people, that very often there are unnecessary pauses after one speaks and the other starts, and never a pause, or seldom a pause in the sentence of the one person, which in music that would be much more interesting, to go one into the other, and the other one, maybe halfway through, hesitates. Who decides that? Does the actor
decide? You try to come to an agreement during rehearsal, but sometimes actors, and that sort of, you know, reaches into what we said before about externalizing your own vanity rather than trying to facilitate the text. Sometimes it feels good. It's an inspiration, or you yourself are carried away by your feeling, so that you actually elongate that moment. And it's, in a way, masturbatory, because, you know, get on with it. It's unnecessary. So it's just emphasizing your own importance. You call them, I don't know whether you call them in English, Bedeutungspausen. Another
Pause of significance.
Yeah. It's really mostly to increase your significance. And sometimes it's helpful because, you know, in the theater you can do it because there's no clear measure. Sometimes it's helpful. You feel that an audience is getting restless, or, you know, and then you continue because it settles them down. They say, oh, why doesn't he say anything? But that's not a real pause. That's a silly trick.
But of course, this is the main difference, because I think a musician who thinks he's going to play to please the public never does.
Yeah, and it's the same is true.
It's not probably because you are mostly facing the audience. You are more conscious of the audience. You know, when you sit at the piano, the audience is on the side. When you conduct, the audience is at the back. When you play, a little bit. But because of that, it is, and that is the greatest danger for young musicians, to get some idea of what is effectful. In other words, if I play, I once played this one phrase and I made a huge crescendo, and I could feel how the public liked it, and therefore I'm going to repeat it in a place where it's totally
that would be the analogy.
Finished. You have to go on stage with the will to please the audience, in the sense that they will like what you do. And anybody who tells me he doesn't care is lying. But you cannot play in a direct way that you think will please the audience.
No, that's absolutely the same. And only the temptation or the danger to do that is probably that much bigger, because as you demonstrated, it demonstrated every single, you know, when you said you play piano, this is exactly, the piano is outside of you. The violin even is outside of you. Even the oboe is mostly outside of you. There's this view of the actor being the player and the instrument at the same time. There's some truth to that, but it's a little academic, I find.
And do you, as an actor, think consciously about the different volume that you want to give, voice volume that you want to give to certain phrases?
Certainly during
rehearsals, you calculate that.
Absolutely, no. That's
and the
part
speed
of
also, because that is, of course, the main difference between what you do and what we do as musicians. We get it dictated, the quantity of sound, the volume of sound, and in a certain way, the speed.
I was trying that once, a long time ago, on a part that I played. I had a little metronome, and I set the pace, because I wanted to have that, I wanted to be able to depend on the objective pace. I wanted, like, exterior guidelines. You can, I'm sure, very precisely say how long you want a quarter note. I can't do that. So I wanted to check it. I gave myself defined measure. Again, silly. It was an experiment. It was kind of interesting. Not even that, really. And it didn't really, do anything.